The resistance had struck a blow against the Valens, but the cost weighed heavily on everyone. The raid on the mining facility had been a success, but it came at the price of lives lost and wounds that would never fully heal. Daniel Carter carried the burden of leadership like a stone tied to his chest, each step forward feeling heavier than the last. He often found himself staring at the small container of Kryllium samples Emma had retrieved, wondering if their sacrifices were truly worth it. Laura Bennett worked tirelessly to keep morale high. She wrote stories about the raid, highlighting acts of bravery and emphasizing the importance of unity. Her words reached survivors across the globe through encrypted broadcasts and handwritten pamphlets distributed in secret. People began to see the rebellion not as a hopeless cause, but as a beacon of hope, a chance to reclaim their freedom. Emma Ross spent most of her time studying the stolen Kryllium samples, trying to understand how the mineral-powered Valen technology. She set up a makeshift lab in an abandoned basement, surrounded by wires, tools, and half-finished experiments. Her hands moved quickly, her mind racing with possibilities. If she could figure out how to disrupt the flow of energy the mineral provided, they might be able to disable Valan weapons and ships. "We're close," Emma said one evening, glancing up from her work as Daniel entered the room. "I think I've found a way to destabilize the Kryllium. If we can create a device that emits a specific frequency, it could render their tech useless." Daniel nodded, though his expression remained cautious. "That's great news, but even if we build this device, getting close enough to use it won't be easy." Emma sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Nothing about this is easy. But we don't have a choice, do we?" "No," Daniel admitted. "We don't." While Emma focused on the science, Jack Monroe took charge of training the growing number of recruits. His military background made him a natural leader, and he pushed the team to improve their skills. They practiced ambush tactics, evasion maneuvers, and hand-to-hand combat in the ruins of abandoned buildings. Though many of the fighters lacked experience, their determination made up for it. "You're doing good work here," Laura told Jack one afternoon as she watched him lead a group through a mock battle scenario. "People respect you." Jack shrugged, his tone gruff but not unkind. "Respect doesn't win wars. Preparation does. We need to be ready for whatever comes next." Despite the progress, tensions ran high within the group. Supplies were running low, and the constant threat of discovery kept everyone on edge. Arguments broke out over strategy and resource allocation, testing the bonds they had formed. Daniel often found himself mediating disputes, reminding everyone that infighting would only weaken them further. One night, as the group gathered in their hideout to discuss their next move, Emma shared her findings. She explained that the Kryllium disruption device would require rare materials that could only be obtained from Valan outposts. The plan was risky, involving direct confrontations with enemy forces, but it was necessary. "We'll hit multiple targets simultaneously," Daniel proposed. "Divide their attention and give ourselves a better chance of succeeding." Laura raised an eyebrow. "That means splitting up the team. Are we sure we're ready for that?" "We don't have a choice," Daniel replied. "If we stay together, we risk losing everything in one attack. This way we spread the risk." Jack nodded in agreement. "He's right. It's dangerous, but it's our best shot." The decision was made, and preparations began immediately. Teams were assigned to different locations, each tasked with retrieving specific components needed for the device. Daniel led one group, while Jack commanded another. Laura stayed behind to coordinate communications and provide support. Emma worked around the clock to finalize the design of the device, knowing that failure was not an option. The night of the operation arrived, and the air buzzed with nervous energy. Each team moved out under the cover of darkness, sticking to back alleys and underground tunnels to avoid detection. Daniel's group headed toward a heavily guarded supply depot on the outskirts of the city. The plan was simple: infiltrate, retrieve the materials, and get out before the Veilons realized what was happening. Things went smoothly at first. Emma's hacking skills allowed them to bypass security systems, and the team slipped into the depot undetected. They located the materials quickly, loading them into backpacks, but just as they prepared to leave, alarms blared, piercing the silence. "They know we're here!" someone shouted. Daniel cursed under his breath, signaling for the team to move. Faster. Shots rang out as Veilon soldiers stormed the area, their weapons firing bursts of light that sizzled through the air. The team scattered, taking cover behind crates and machinery. Chaos erupted as they fought back, exchanging fire and trying to hold their ground. "Fall back!" Daniel yelled over the noise. "Stick to the plan!" The retreat was chaotic, every step fraught with danger. One member of the team fell behind, injured during the escape. Daniel hesitated, torn between leaving them behind and risking the entire mission. In the end, he couldn't abandon them. With Jack's help, they managed to drag the injured fighter to safety, narrowly avoiding capture. Meanwhile, other teams faced similar challenges. Some succeeded in retrieving their assigned materials, while others were forced to abort their missions. By dawn, the survivors regrouped at the hideout, battered but alive. Despite the setbacks, they had secured enough components to complete the device. Emma wasted no time assembling the final product. She worked non-stop, her hands trembling with exhaustion, but her focus unwavering. When the device was finally ready, she held it up triumphantly, a small metallic box with blinking lights and exposed wires. "This is it," she said, her voice filled with both pride and apprehension. "If this works, we might actually stand a chance." But their victory was short-lived. As the team celebrated their accomplishment, a traitor revealed their location to the Veilons. Within hours, the hideout was surrounded by enemy forces. The group scrambled to evacuate, grabbing what supplies they could and fleeing into the night. Explosions lit up the sky as the Veilons destroyed the building, erasing all evidence of their presence. Amid the chaos, Emma made the ultimate sacrifice. Realizing she was slowing the group down due to her injuries, she volunteered to stay behind and create a diversion. "Go!" she urged, her voice firm despite the tears streaming down her face. "You need to finish this. For all of us." Daniel wanted to argue, to tell her there had to be another way, but he knew she was right. Reluctantly, he nodded, promising to honor her sacrifice. As the rest of the team disappeared into the shadows, Emma activated the prototype device, flooding the area with a pulse of energy that disabled nearby Veilon weapons. The distraction gave the others precious time to escape, but it also sealed her fate. When the dust settled, Daniel and the remaining members of the team regrouped in a new location. Grief hung heavy in the air, but so did resolve. Emma's death reminded them of the stakes. They couldn't afford to falter now. As they planned their next move, reports began circulating about unrest among the Veilons. Commander Zoran's harsh tactics had alienated some of his own officers, who questioned whether his methods were effective or merely reckless. Laura seized the opportunity to amplify these divisions, using intercepted broadcasts to spread propaganda that undermined Zoran's authority. "Even the Veilons aren't united," Laura said during a meeting. "If we can exploit their weaknesses, we might be able to turn the tide." Daniel agreed, though his thoughts kept drifting back to Emma. He missed her sharp mind and quiet determination, but he knew she wouldn't want them to dwell on loss. Instead, they channeled their grief into action, preparing for the final phase of their fight. The rebellion had grown stronger, fueled by courage and sacrifice. Each setback had taught them valuable lessons, and each victory had brought them closer to their goal. Though the road ahead remained uncertain, one thing was clear. Humanity's spirit was unbreakable, and as long as they stood together, they would never kneel. Weeks turned into months, and life under Veilon rule became harsher with each passing day. The streets of New York, once bustling with energy, now lay eerily quiet. Buildings stood abandoned, their windows shattered and walls covered in grime. People moved cautiously, heads down, avoiding eye contact with the Veylan patrols that marched through the city like silent machines. Fear had taken root, spreading faster than any disease. Daniel Carter spent most of his days hidden in the shadows, watching and waiting. He had traded his leather jacket for a worn hoodie, blending in with the crowd to avoid drawing attention. His nights, however, were anything but quiet. Together with Laura Bennett and Emma Ross, he worked tirelessly to build a network of resistance. They met in secret locations, abandoned subway tunnels, empty warehouses, or crumbling apartment buildings, always careful to cover their tracks. Emma's hacking skills proved invaluable. She spent hours hunched over her laptop, deciphering Veylan communications and uncovering fragments of information about their technology. One evening, as Daniel and Laura gathered around her in a dimly lit room, she made a breakthrough. "I think I found something," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, pulling up a series of symbols on the screen. "The Veylans rely on this mineral. They call it Krillium. It powers everything from their ships to their weapons." Laura leaned closer, squinting, at the screen. "Where do they get it?" she asked. "From Earth," Emma replied. "It's deep underground, near the planet's core. They've set up mining operations all over the world to extract it." Daniel frowned, thinking hard. "So if we cut off their supply of Krillium, we cripple them," Emma finished, nodding. "But getting close to those mines won't be easy. They're heavily guarded." Despite the risks, the idea sparked a glimmer of hope. For the first time in months, Daniel felt like they might actually have a chance. "We'll need a plan," he said firmly. "Something bold enough to make an impact, but smart enough to keep us alive." As the resistance grew, so did the challenges. Word of their efforts spread quietly, reaching other cities and towns. Survivors, who had been living in fear, began stepping forward, eager to join the fight. Among them was Jack Monroe, a former soldier with a haunted past. He introduced himself during one of their meetings, his tall frame filling the doorway of the old warehouse where they were hiding. "I heard you're planning to take the fight to the Veylans," Jack said, his voice steady but tinged with bitterness. "Count me in." Daniel studied him carefully. Jack's eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen too much, but there was also determination in them. "What can you bring to the table?" Daniel asked. "A lot," Jack replied. "I know. How to handle weapons, organize tactics, and survive when things go south. You're going to need all of that if you want to stand a chance." With Jack's help, the group began preparing for their first major operation, a raid on a Veylan mining facility buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. The mission would be dangerous, requiring precise timing and coordination. But they had no choice. If they wanted to strike a blow against the invaders, they needed to act fast. Emma worked tirelessly to map out the facility using satellite data intercepted from Veylan systems. Laura reached out to contacts in nearby towns, gathering supplies and recruiting volunteers willing to risk their lives. Meanwhile, Daniel and Jack trained the growing number of recruits, teaching them basic combat skills and strategies for evading detection. As the day of the raid approached, tensions ran high. Everyone knew the stakes. If they failed, the consequences would be catastrophic. But failure wasn't an option. Not anymore. On the night of the operation, the team gathered in a forest clearing miles away from the mining site. The air was cold, and the ground was damp beneath their boots. Daniel addressed the group, his voice low but firm. "This isn't just about us," he said, looking at each person in turn. "It's about everyone who's suffered under the Veylans. We're fighting for them, for every man, woman, and child who's lost hope. Tonight, We show them that humanity is still worth saving." The group nodded, their faces illuminated by the faint glow of flashlights. Without another word, they moved out, sticking to the shadows as they approached the facility. The journey was long and grueling, but adrenaline kept them moving forward. When they finally reached the entrance, Emma hacked into the security system, disabling cameras and alarms. The team slipped inside unnoticed, splitting into smaller groups to carry out their tasks. Some focused on planting explosives to destroy key equipment, while others searched for samples of Krillium to study later. Everything seemed to be going according to plan, until disaster struck. A patrol of Valen soldiers appeared unexpectedly, forcing the team to scatter. Shots rang out and chaos erupted. Daniel found himself pinned down behind a pile of crates, exchanging fire with the enemy. Beside him, Jack provided cover, his "Aim steady despite the chaos! We need to move!" Jack shouted over the noise. "Now!" Daniel nodded, gritting his teeth. Together, they dashed toward the exit, dodging blasts of light that sizzled past them. Behind them, explosions rocked the facility as the charges detonated, sending shockwaves through the tunnels. They emerged into the cool night air, gasping for breath. The rest of the team regrouped nearby, battered but alive. Emma clutched a small container filled with Krillium samples, her face pale but triumphant. "We did it," she said, her voice trembling with exhaustion. "We actually did it." But their victory came at a cost. Several members of the team hadn't made it out, including a young man named Ryan who had joined only weeks earlier. His death weighed heavily on everyone, especially Daniel. As they trudged back to their hideout, he couldn't shake the image of Ryan's lifeless body lying in the tunnel. Back at the base, Laura tended to the wounded while Daniel sat alone in a corner, staring at the floor. Emma approached him cautiously, sitting down beside him. "You okay?" she asked softly. "No," Daniel admitted after a moment. "I keep thinking about Ryan and everyone else we've lost. What if it's not worth it? What if we're just throwing our lives away?" Emma placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's worth it," she said firmly, "because every step we take brings us closer to freedom, and because people like Ryan believed in what we're doing. We owe it to them to keep going." Her words gave Daniel strength, though the pain remained. He knew she was right. They couldn't afford to give up, not when so much depended on their success. In the days that followed, news of the raid spread quickly. Resistance groups in other regions began launching their own attacks, inspired by the Daring Operation. The Valans responded with brutal force, cracking down on suspected rebels and tightening their grip on the population. But the rebellion refused to be silenced. Laura used her journalistic skills to document the growing movement, creating pamphlets and encrypted broadcasts to share stories of resistance. She highlighted acts of courage and defiance, reminding people that they weren't alone in their struggle. Her work became a lifeline for many, offering both information and hope. Meanwhile, tensions within the Valan ranks began to surface. Commander Zoran, furious over the attack on the mining facility, lashed out at his subordinates. "How could you let this happen?" he demanded, his voice echoing through the command center. "These humans are nothing but savages, yet they continue to defy us." His officers shifted uncomfortably, avoiding his gaze. Some dared to whisper among themselves, questioning whether Zoran's methods were truly effective. Back on Earth, the Resistance noticed these cracks in the Valan armor and seized the opportunity to exploit them. Using intercepted communications, Laura devised a plan to amplify dissent within the alien ranks. With Emma's help, she hacked into Valan broadcasts, transmitting messages designed to sow doubt and confusion. "Your leaders have failed you," one message read. "Humanity fights for survival, but you fight for nothing. Why die for a cause you don't believe in?" The effect was subtle but undeniable. Reports of unrest among the Valens trickled in, fueling the rebellion's determination. Though the invaders still held immense power, their aura of invincibility was beginning to crack. For Daniel, Laura, and the rest of the team, the road ahead remained uncertain. Every victory brought new challenges, and every loss tested their resolve. But they pressed on, driven by the belief that humanity's spirit could never truly be extinguished. As winter settled over the land, blanketing the ruins of cities in snow, the resistance prepared for its next move. They knew the fight was far from over, but for the first time in months, they allowed themselves to dream of a future free from oppression. The destruction of Nexus Prime marked a turning point in the galaxy. The once mighty Galactic Coalition, which had ruled with an iron fist for centuries, was now fractured and leaderless. Species that had suffered under its oppression began to rise up, reclaiming their worlds and declaring independence. For humanity, it was a moment of triumph, but also one of uncertainty. The Free Systems Alliance, born out of rebellion, now faced the daunting task of rebuilding what had been broken. Nathan Cole stood on the bridge of the USS Invincible, staring at the stars through the observation window. The battle scars from Nexus Prime were still visible on the ship's hull, a reminder of how close they had come to failure. Laura Hayes joined him, holding 2 cups of synthetic coffee. "You look like you haven't slept in days," she said gently. "I haven't," Nathan admitted, taking the cup. "It's hard to rest when there's so much left to do." Laura nodded, understanding the weight he carried. "You've done more than anyone could have asked. Now it's time to let others share the burden." She was right, but Nathan struggled to let go. Every decision felt like it rested solely on his shoulders. The Free Systems Alliance needed guidance, and as the man who had led the charge against the Coalition, all eyes were on him. Yet he knew he couldn't do it alone. Humanity and the galaxy needed leaders, not just one hero. The first step was establishing a new order. Representatives from allied species gathered aboard the Invincible to discuss the future. It wasn't easy. Mistrust lingered between races that had spent centuries divided by the Coalition's policies. Some argued for immediate retaliation against remaining Coalition forces, while others pushed for diplomacy to prevent further bloodshed. Debates grew heated, but Laura worked tirelessly behind the scenes to mediate conflicts and find common ground. "We're not here to replace the Coalition with another empire," she reminded everyone during one particularly tense meeting. "We're here to create something better, a partnership based on respect and cooperation." Her words resonated, and slowly progress was made. A provisional council was formed, consisting of representatives from key species within the alliance. Emily Carter played a crucial role in drafting agreements, using her knowledge of history to avoid repeating past mistakes. Jason Reed, though skeptical of politics, helped organize patrols to protect newly liberated planets from rogue Coalition remnants. As the alliance took shape, Nathan focused on addressing the needs of ordinary people. Decades of Coalition rule had left many worlds impoverished, their resources stripped away to fuel alien luxuries. The Invincible became a symbol of hope as it traveled from planet to planet, delivering aid and rebuilding infrastructure. Wherever it went, crowds gathered to cheer, waving makeshift banners emblazoned with images of the ancient supercarrier. But not everyone welcomed the change. On some planets, loyalists to the old regime resisted fiercely, launching guerrilla attacks against Free Systems forces. These skirmishes tested the resolve of the fledgling alliance, forcing Nathan and his crew to adapt quickly. They learned to rely on local militias, training them to defend their homes while the Invincible handled larger threats. One such threat emerged when rumors surfaced of a secret Coalition base hidden deep in uncharted space. Intelligence suggested it housed advanced technology capable of restarting the war if left unchecked. Nathan knew they couldn't ignore it, but sending the Invincible into unknown territory risked stretching their defenses too thin. "We'll take a small team," he decided after consulting with Athena. "Just enough to scout the area and disable whatever they're planning." Laura volunteered immediately, refusing to let him go without her. Jason insisted on joining as well, arguing that his piloting skills would be essential. Together, they assembled a group of trusted crew members and set off in a stealth shuttle, leaving the Invincible under Emily's command. The journey was perilous, navigating through asteroid fields and radiation zones that obscured sensor readings. When they finally reached the base, they discovered it was heavily fortified, guarded by automated drones and energy shields. Sneaking inside required every ounce of skill and ingenuity they possessed. Inside, they found evidence of experiments designed to weaponize captured alien biology. One lab contained vats filled with glowing liquid, each holding grotesque hybrids of different species. Laura recoiled in horror. They were trying to create soldiers, monsters. Nathan clenched his fists. "This is why we fight, to stop this kind of cruelty." They sabotaged the facility, planting explosives to destroy the labs and any data stored within. As they made their escape, alarms blared, alerting the guards to their presence. A fierce firefight erupted, with Jason expertly maneuvering the shuttle through a gauntlet of enemy fire. Just as it seemed they wouldn't make it, reinforcements arrived, Allied ships responding to the distress signal Nathan had sent before landing. Back aboard the Invincible, the crew celebrated another victory. But Nathan remained somber, reflecting on the horrors they had uncovered. "The Coalition may be gone," he told Laura later, "but its legacy will haunt us for years to come." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "That's why we keep going. To build something better, no matter how hard it gets." Over time, the galaxy began to heal. Trade routes reopened, connecting worlds that had been isolated for generations. Education and technology spread, empowering communities to thrive without fear of exploitation. The Free Systems Alliance grew stronger, its members united by shared values rather than forced obedience. Nathan continued to lead, though he gradually stepped back from the spotlight, encouraging younger voices to take charge. He often visited Earth, marveling at how much it had changed since his youth. Cities once reduced to ruins now flourished with life, their skies filled with ships built by human hands. Children looked up at the stars with wonder, dreaming of adventures beyond their world. One evening, as the Invincible drifted peacefully through space, Nathan stood on the observation deck with Laura. The galaxy stretched out before them, vast and full of possibilities. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" she asked. "All the time," he replied. "There's still so much work to do, but for the first time I feel like we're moving in the right direction." She smiled. "That's because you showed everyone what's possible. You gave them hope." Nathan shook his head. "Not me. All of us. We did it together." And perhaps that was the greatest lesson of all. Humanity hadn't risen alone. It had taken courage, sacrifice, and unity across species to overcome centuries of oppression. The USS Invincible would always be remembered as the spark that ignited the revolution. But the real strength lay in the hearts of those who dared to dream of a better future. As the ship sailed onward, carrying its crew toward new horizons, one truth became clear. The galaxy was no longer defined by fear. It belonged to those brave enough to shape it, a testament to the enduring spirit of freedom. The galaxy was changing, but change never came without challenges. The Free Systems Alliance had grown stronger, yet the scars of centuries under the Coalition still lingered. Worlds that had been stripped of resources struggled to rebuild, and tensions between species sometimes flared despite their shared victory. Nathan Cole understood that peace wasn't something you won in a single battle. It was something you worked for every day. On board the USS Invincible, Life had settled into a rhythm of rebuilding and exploration. The ship no longer served as a weapon of war, but as a beacon of hope, traveling from planet to deliver aid, share knowledge, and foster unity. Its massive engines roared through space, not with aggression, but with purpose. Yet, even as the crew celebrated their successes, they remained vigilant. The remnants of the coalition were scattered, but they hadn't disappeared entirely. One evening, as the Invincible orbited a newly liberated planet, Laura Hayes approached Nathan on the observation deck. She carried a data tablet, her expression serious. "We've got reports of trouble near the edge of Coalition territory," she said. "It seems some of their loyalists are regrouping." Nathan frowned. "How many?" "Hard to say. But it's enough to worry our allies. They're asking for help," he sighed, rubbing his temples. He had hoped for a reprieve after Nexus Prime, a chance to focus solely on rebuilding. Instead, the fight continued. "What do we know about them?" Laura handed him the tablet. "They're calling themselves the Iron Vanguard, led by former Coalition officers who refuse to accept defeat. Their goal is simple: restore the old order at any cost." Nathan scanned the information, his jaw tightening. The Iron Vanguard wasn't just a band of rebels. They were organized, well-funded, and dangerous. If left unchecked, they could undo everything the Free Systems Alliance had fought for. "We need to deal with this before it grows worse," he said finally. "But we can't afford another full-scale war. We'll have to hit them strategically. Take out their leaders and disrupt their operations." Laura nodded. "I'll start coordinating with our allies. Maybe we can gather intelligence or send scouts ahead." "Good idea." Nathan paused, looking out at the stars. "And I want Jason leading the strike team. He's got the experience we need for something like this." Over the next few days, preparations began. Athena analyzed the available data, pinpointing likely locations of the Iron Vanguard's bases. Emily Carter worked with engineers to upgrade the Invincible's systems, ensuring the ship was ready for whatever lay ahead. Meanwhile, Nathan reached out to the Provisional Council, explaining the situation and seeking support. Not everyone agreed with his plan. Some council members argued that focusing on reconstruction should take priority over chasing shadows. "We've already defeated the coalition," one representative said during a tense meeting. "Why risk losing what we've gained for the sake of vengeance?" "It's not about vengeance," Nathan replied firmly. "It's about protecting what we've built. If we let these loyalists gain strength, they'll drag us back into conflict. We can't afford to wait until it's too late." His words carried weight, and eventually the council approved the mission. With reinforcements from allied worlds, the Invincible set course for the edge of Coalition territory, where the Iron Vanguard was rumored to be operating. As they approached the crew discovered signs of devastation. Planets once thriving under the Coalition's rule were now barren wastelands, their populations either enslaved or driven away. Evidence suggested the Iron Vanguard was using these areas as staging grounds, forcing locals to work in brutal conditions to fund their cause. "This is sickening," Laura muttered as they reviewed footage from reconnaissance drones. "They're treating their own people like tools." Nathan clenched his fists. "We stop them here, no matter what." The first target was a heavily fortified outpost hidden within an asteroid belt. Using stealth technology, the Invincible slipped past automated defenses and deployed a small strike team led by Jason Reed. Armed with plasma rifles and explosives, the team infiltrated the base, disabling key systems and gathering intelligence. Along the way, they freed dozens of prisoners, many of whom were malnourished and injured. When the team returned to the ship, Nathan listened intently as Jason reported their findings. "They're planning something big," Jason said grimly. "From what we gathered, they've developed a new kind of weapon, something that could destabilize entire star systems." A chill ran down Nathan's spine. "Do we know where they're building it?" Jason shook his head. "Not yet, but we found coordinates for another base. It might hold more answers." The crew wasted no time. Guided by Athena, the Invincible moved swiftly to the next location. This time, however, they weren't so lucky. As they approached the base, alarms blared, and enemy ships emerged from hiding, surrounding them. The Iron Vanguard had been expecting them. "Looks like we walked into a trap," Jason muttered, gripping the controls of his fighter. Nathan gritted his teeth. "Stay calm. We've faced worse." The ensuing battle was chaotic. Plasma bolts streaked through space as the Invincible's turrets unleashed a barrage of fire. Pilots darted between enemy vessels, dodging projectiles while delivering counterattacks. Despite being outnumbered, the crew held their ground, their training and determination giving them an edge. Amidst the chaos, Laura coordinated communications, shouting orders and updates to keep everyone focused. "Hold the line! Reinforcements are incoming!" True to her word, Allied ships arrived just in time, turning the tide of the battle. Together, they overwhelmed the Iron Vanguard fleet, forcing the remaining ships to retreat. With the enemy routed, the Invincible pressed forward, launching a second wave of fighters to assault the base. Inside, the strike team faced fierce resistance. Automated turrets and armed guards blocked every corridor, forcing them to rely on quick thinking and teamwork. Finally, they reached the heart of the facility, a massive chamber housing the mysterious weapon. It resembled a giant cannon, its surface covered in glowing runes and wires. "We need to destroy this thing," Nathan said, examining the device. "Now," Emily hesitated. "If we detonate it here, the explosion could tear apart the entire asteroid." "Then we rig it to overload remotely," Nathan replied. "Get everyone out, then trigger it from the ship." Working quickly, the team planted charges and evacuated the base. Back aboard the Invincible, Nathan gave the order to activate the detonation sequence. Seconds later, the weapon exploded in a brilliant flash, obliterating the base and scattering debris across the asteroid field. Though victorious, the crew knew the fight wasn't over. The Iron Vanguard was still out there, and their leader remained at large, but each victory brought them closer to ending the threat once and for all. As the Invincible drifted away from the wreckage, Nathan stood on the bridge, watching the stars. Laura joined him, her voice soft. "You did it again. You saved us." He shook his head. "We did it together, and we'll keep doing it, no matter how long it takes." She smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder. "That's why you're the leader they trust. Because you never give up." Nathan looked out at the endless expanse of space, feeling both weary and hopeful. The road ahead would be long, filled with challenges that tested their resolve. But as long as they stood united, nothing was impossible. The galaxy had changed because of their courage, and it would continue to change, one step at a time. Years passed, and the partnership between humanity and the Vaylith grew stronger. What had started as a fragile agreement born out of necessity evolved into a genuine collaboration that transformed both species. The changes weren't always easy, but they were undeniable. Earth became greener, its skies clearer, and its people more united in purpose. Meanwhile, the Vaylith, once wary of humanity's reckless expansion, began to see humans not as threats, but as allies capable of growth. Rachel Miller sat in her small office aboard the embassy ship EOS, now converted into a hub for human Vaylith cooperation. Her desk was cluttered with notes, data pads, and sketches of alien symbols she still worked tirelessly to understand. Though retired from active diplomacy, Rachel couldn't let go of her passion for bridging the gap between species. She spent her days mentoring young linguists and diplomats, sharing the lessons she'd learned during those tense early days of negotiation. Today, however, her focus was elsewhere. A message had arrived from Galactic, a rare direct communication. The Valith emissary requested a meeting aboard their central vessel, located near the edge of explored space. Rachel immediately contacted Daniel Hayes, who had been living quietly on Earth, teaching at a university and occasionally advising world leaders. "It's unusual for them to call like this," Daniel said over the video link, his brow furrowed. "Do you think something's wrong?" "I don't know," Rachel admitted, her voice tinged with concern. "But we should go. If Galactic wants to talk, it must be important." Within hours, they boarded a shuttle bound for the Valith vessel, accompanied by a small team of experts. As they approached the massive ship, its surface shimmered with vibrant colors, pulsing rhythmically as if alive. Stepping inside felt like entering another world entirely. Soft glows illuminated the corridors, and floating holograms displayed scenes of planets, stars, and ecosystems teeming with life. Galactic awaited them in a grand chamber, surrounded by other Valith emissaries. Its body radiated calm authority, its glowing eyes fixed on Rachel and Daniel as they entered. Without preamble, it addressed them. "Humanity has shown progress," Galactic began, its voice translated into English through their devices. "But challenges remain. There are forces among your kind, and even among ours, that resist unity." Rachel exchanged a glance with Daniel, her heart sinking slightly. They had hoped the worst of the resistance was behind them, but it seemed old divisions still lingered. "What kind of challenges?" Daniel asked cautiously. Galactic hesitated, its colors shifting subtly, a sign Rachel recognized as hesitation or concern. "There are factions within my own species questioning the wisdom of this alliance," it explained. "They believe humanity cannot be trusted, that your past actions prove you are incapable of lasting change." Rachel stepped forward, her voice firm despite the weight of the moment. "We've worked hard to prove otherwise," she said. "We've made sacrifices, followed the terms of the agreement, and embraced new ways of living. Isn't that enough?" "It is promising," Galactic replied. "But trust is fragile. One misstep could undo everything we have built." Daniel nodded grimly. "So what do you need from us? How can we help strengthen this alliance?" Galactic gestured toward a series of holographic projections that appeared around them. Each depicted potential scenarios, conflicts over resources, misunderstandings exacerbated by cultural differences, even whispers of rebellion among colonies resistant to change. It was clear the Valith were preparing for contingencies, planning for every possible outcome. "We seek your insight," Galactic said, "your understanding of your own species. Together, we must find solutions before these fractures widen." For the next several days, Rachel, Daniel, and their team worked closely with the Valith, brainstorming strategies to address the emerging threats. They proposed educational campaigns to counter misinformation, joint missions to demonstrate the benefits of cooperation, and stricter enforcement of the agreement's terms. The discussions were intense, often stretching late into the night, but progress was made. Back on Earth, news of renewed tensions spread quickly. Senator Blake seized the opportunity to reignite his opposition to the agreement, accusing the Valith of using fear tactics to tighten their grip on humanity. His rhetoric gained traction, especially in regions hardest hit by economic shifts caused by the deal. Protests erupted once again, with some calling for renegotiation and others demanding outright withdrawal. Captain Lucas Ford, now an advisor to the United Nations Council, watched the unrest unfold with growing unease. He knew how precarious the situation was. If public opinion turned decisively against the Valith, all the progress they'd made could unravel overnight. During a council meeting, he urged leaders to act swiftly. "We can't afford to lose momentum," Ford said, his voice steady but urgent. "The Valith aren't perfect, but neither are we. This partnership isn't about perfection. It's about moving forward together. His words resonated with many, including Lieutenant Harper, who had taken command of the Aegis. Under her leadership, the ship became a symbol of unity, hosting delegations from both species and showcasing successful joint projects. When rumors of rebellion reached her ears, she volunteered to lead a diplomatic mission to troubled colonies, hoping to quell dissent before it escalated. Harper's efforts paid off. Traveling from colony to colony, she listened to grievances and shared stories of the positive impacts of the agreement. She emphasized that while sacrifices had been necessary, the long-term benefits far outweighed the short-term hardships. Slowly, support for the agreement began to stabilize. Meanwhile, Rachel and Daniel returned to Earth, bringing with them proposals developed during their time with the Veilith. They presented these ideas to the United Nations Council, urging immediate implementation. Among their suggestions was the creation of a permanent oversight body composed of representatives from both species, tasked with addressing disputes and ensuring compliance with the agreement. The Council debated fiercely, with Senator Blake leading the charge against the proposal. "This is just another step toward handing control to the Veilith," he argued. "Why should we give them power over our decisions?" Daniel stood firm, countering Blake's arguments with unwavering resolve. "Because working together is the only way to ensure peace," he said. "If we keep fighting each other, we'll destroy everything we've fought so hard to build." After days of deliberation, the Council narrowly approved the proposal. The oversight body was established, marking a significant milestone in human-Veilith relations. For the first time, representatives from both species would govern side by side, making decisions based on mutual benefit rather than individual gain. As months turned into years, the alliance continued to flourish. Colonies thrived under shared governance, blending human innovation with Veilith efficiency. Joint research initiatives led to breakthroughs that improved life for both species, from advanced medical treatments to sustainable energy sources. Even art and culture began to merge, with humans and Veilith creating works that celebrated their shared journey. Galactic remained a guiding figure throughout, its presence a constant reminder of the trust that had been earned and the responsibility that came with it. During one final meeting aboard the Veilith vessel, it addressed Rachel and Daniel with a tone of quiet pride. "You have proven yourselves," Galactic said. "Not perfect, but willing to grow. That is all any species can ask for." Rachel smiled faintly, her eyes glistening with emotion. "Thank you," she said simply, "for giving us a chance." Daniel nodded, his expression thoughtful. "We're not done yet," he added. "There's still so much work to do." Galactic's colors brightened slightly, a gesture Rachel interpreted as approval. "Then continue," it said. "Together, you may yet achieve greatness." As they left the Veilith vessel and returned to Earth, Rachel and Daniel reflected on how far they'd come. The road ahead would undoubtedly hold challenges, but they faced it with hope rather than fear. Humanity had stared into the abyss and chosen dialogue over destruction. In doing so, it had forged a bond with a species vastly different from its own, one that promised a brighter future for both. Under the vast canopy of stars, two civilizations moved forward, hand in hand, proving that even in the infinite expanse of space, connection was possible. And in that connection lay the promise of endless possibilities. The galaxy had been a place of order for centuries, governed by the Council. This council was made up of powerful planets and civilizations that worked together to keep peace and share resources. Earth had always been one of the obedient members, giving its technology and people while getting benefits like trade and alliances in return. But things were starting to change. People on Earth were growing restless, and tensions were rising. Daniel Carter was a man who noticed this unrest early. He was a politician from New York known for his charm and ability to inspire people. Daniel began speaking out against the council, saying that humanity was being used unfairly. He argued that Earth gave far more than it received and deserved better treatment. His words resonated with many, especially those who felt tired of following rules set by distant worlds. Rachel Monroe lived thousands of miles away from Daniel, working at the Lunar Research Facility. She was a scientist focused on creating sustainable energy solutions for space colonies. At first, Rachel didn't pay much attention to Daniel's speeches. To her, they sounded like angry complaints rather than practical ideas. But everything changed when the Council decided to punish Earth. They imposed sanctions because Earth hadn't met its required resource quotas. Suddenly, life became harder for everyone. Supplies dwindled, prices rose, and protests erupted all over the planet. People started listening to Daniel more closely. His message of independence grew louder as frustration spread. He promised that if Earth broke away from the Council, humanity could stand on its own 2 feet. Many agreed with him, believing that freedom would bring prosperity. Others were skeptical, worried about what might happen if Earth lost access to interstellar trade and protection. Despite these concerns, support for Daniel surged. Rachel watched as public opinion shifted dramatically. Even her co-workers at the research facility talked excitedly about the idea of independence. Some saw it as a chance to prove that humanity could succeed without help from others. Others simply wanted to escape the strict rules imposed by the Council. Rachel wasn't sure how she felt. On one hand, she admired the pride swelling amongst her colleagues. On the other hand, she couldn't ignore the risks involved in leaving such a powerful alliance. The debate reached a boiling point when Earth held a historic vote. Citizens across the globe cast their ballots, deciding whether or not to sever ties with the Council. The result shocked even the most optimistic supporters of independence. By a narrow margin, Earth declared itself free from the Council's control. Cheers erupted in cities around the world. Flags were raised, fireworks lit up the night sky, and celebrations filled the streets. For the first time in centuries, Earth stood alone in the galaxy. But the decision didn't go unnoticed. Other planets watched nervously as Earth defied the Council. Some saw it as an act of bravery, proof that smaller worlds could challenge the status quo. Others viewed it as reckless, fearing the consequences of upsetting the balance of power. The Council itself reacted with silence, which only added to the tension. No one knew what would happen next. In the weeks that followed, Daniel became a hero to many. Crowds gathered to hear him speak, hanging on to every word. He painted a picture of a bright future where humanity thrived without interference. "We have the strength," he said during one speech. "We have the knowledge. All we need is belief in ourselves." His confidence inspired hope, but it also masked the challenges ahead. For Rachel, the reality of Earth's new position hit hard. Supplies that once arrived regularly from other planets stopped coming. Equipment repairs took longer because replacement parts were scarce. Scientists like her had to find creative solutions to problems they'd never faced before. It was frustrating, but there was also a strange sense of pride in overcoming obstacles independently. Still, not everyone shared Rachel's mixed feelings. John Harper, captain of the Starship Odyssey, found himself caught in the middle of the chaos. His job was to deliver supplies to colonies scattered throughout nearby systems. These colonies relied heavily on Earth for food, medicine, and fuel. Without steady shipments, they struggled to survive. John and his crew worked tirelessly, trying to stretch their limited resources as far as possible. But no matter how hard they tried, it wasn't enough. One day, while docking at a struggling colony, John met a young engineer named Lisa Turner. She thanked him for bringing supplies, but warned him that they wouldn't last long. "Things are bad here," she said, shaking her head. "If something doesn't change soon, we won't make it through the year." Her words stayed with John as he left the colony behind. He realized that Earth's independence came at a cost, one that affected not just its own people, but countless others depending on them. Back on Earth, cracks began to form within Daniel's administration. Not everyone agreed on how to handle the challenges of independence. Some officials pushed for aggressive expansion into unclaimed territories, hoping to secure new resources. Others advocated for rebuilding relationships with the Council, arguing that isolation wasn't sustainable. Arguments grew heated and divisions widened. Amidst the turmoil, Rachel made a startling discovery. While analyzing data from deep space, probes, she detected an unusual signal. It originated from a region near the edge of the galaxy, far beyond any known civilization. Curious, Rachel dug deeper, running simulations and cross-referencing information. The signal seemed artificial, possibly a distress call. Excited by the possibility of finding allies, or at least answers, she reported her findings to Earth's government. To her disappointment, officials dismissed her concerns. They told her that focusing on internal issues was more important than chasing mysterious signals. Frustrated, Rachel decided to take matters into her own hands. She contacted John Harper, explaining what she had found and asking for his help. Though skeptical at first, John agreed to investigate. After all, anything that might ease the pressure on struggling colonies was worth looking into. As John prepared the Odyssey for the journey, Rachel reflected on the path Earth had taken. Independence had brought both pride and hardship. It forced humanity to rely on itself, but it also exposed weaknesses that couldn't be ignored. Was Daniel right? Could Earth truly thrive without the Council? Or had they made a grave mistake? Only time would tell. For now, Rachel clung to hope. Hope that the signal she discovered held answers. Hope that John's mission would yield results. And hope that humanity's bold step toward freedom wouldn't lead to disaster. As the Odyssey launched into the unknown, Rachel felt a mix of fear and determination. Whatever lay ahead, one thing was certain. Earth's decision to cut ties with the Council had set events in motion that would shape the fate of the galaxy, and perhaps the stars themselves.